The gift no one wanted. The war was finally over. Captain Ryland stood under the burning twin suns, his armor covered in dust and scars. Soldiers cheered around him. The enemy had surrendered, and the planet of Vacron was now under human control. Ryland didn't feel like celebrating. He had lost too many good people. His unit, once filled with laughter, was now quiet. But command had a reward for him, a special prize for his bravery. He didn't want anything, but they insisted. A crate was dragged in front of him. It looked like an old cage covered in metal bars. Inside was a figure, small, thin, and chained at the wrists and ankles. "A slave," said the officer proudly. "An alien female, from the enemy's stock, yours now." The crowd around them laughed. "What's he going to do with that thing?" One soldier joked. Another said, "Might as well toss it back in the fire." Ryland said nothing. He stepped forward and looked inside the cage. She was curled in a corner, shaking. Her skin was pale purple, and her long silver hair was dirty and tangled. Her eyes, large and glowing, were filled with fear. When she saw Ryland, she didn't move. She just stared like she expected him to hit her. "She's broken," said the officer. "No fight left in her. The perfect reward." Ryland didn't reply. He simply nodded and ordered 2 men to carry the crate to his transport ship. Inside the ship, the alien girl was silent. She sat on the floor, chains still around her arms. Her clothes were torn and barely covered her thin body. She hadn't spoken once. She didn't ask for food, water, or even her name. Ryland sat across from her. "I didn't ask for you," he said quietly. "But now that you're here, I won't hurt you." She didn't react. She just lowered her head. He stood up, grabbed a medkit, and moved toward her slowly. The moment he got close, she flinched, arms up, body shaking like she was ready for pain. His chest tightened. What had been done to her? "It's okay," he said softly. "I just want to help." Still no reply. He gently cleaned a wound on her arm. She hissed but didn't pull away. Her skin was soft but covered in old scars, some fresh, some faded. It was clear she had suffered for a long time. Over the next few days, Ryland gave her clean clothes, warm food, and water. She never spoke, but she ate. She still slept on the floor, curled up like an animal, afraid to take space. Ryland didn't force anything. He placed a blanket near her. She never touched it the first night. On the second, she pulled it close. On the third, she looked at him while holding it. One night as he walked in, she stood up slowly. Her chains clinked as she moved. She bowed deeply in front of him, forehead nearly touching the floor. Ryland was shocked. "You don't have to bow," he said. She looked up at him. For the first time, her lips moved. "Property. I'll show thanks," she whispered in a weak voice. "No," Ryland said gently. "You're not property. Not to me." She blinked, confused. He kneeled in front of her. "I don't want a slave. I want to understand you." She didn't know what to say. No one had ever said such words to her. The next morning, Ryland unlocked the chains. She stared at him, eyes wide. When the last cuff fell from her wrist, she didn't run. She didn't attack. She just dropped to her knees and cried. Silent tears that ran down her cheeks. Ryland sat beside her. He didn't touch her. He just stayed close. She cried for a long time. When it stopped, she turned to him and pointed to her chest. "L43, she said, her voice shaking. He frowned. "That's not a name." "It is mine," she whispered. "No," he said. "That's what they gave you, not who you are." He thought for a moment. "Leary," he said. "How about Leary?" She looked at him, unsure. "Leary," he said again, smiling. Slowly. A tiny smile touched her lips. It was the first time she ever smiled in front of him, and Ryland knew this was no gift. She was no reward. She was a person, broken and scared, but still alive. And maybe, just maybe, he could help her heal. She flinched at every move. Leary didn't understand what was happening. Every day since the chains had fallen, she expected pain. She waited for shouting, for beatings, for commands screamed in languages she couldn't speak. But none of that came. Instead, the human, Rylan, only gave her food, clean water, and space. He didn't touch her. He didn't lock her up again. But still, she flinched. She flinched when he entered a room too fast. She flinched when his boots echoed on the metal floor. She flinched when he raised his voice, not in anger, but just to call out something. Her body had learned fear. Even kindness felt dangerous now. Rylan watched her quietly from the corner of the room. She was sitting, on the floor again, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the wall. Her back was tense. Even though he had given her a soft cot, she never used it. He brought a small plate of food and crouched near her. Slowly, carefully, he placed it in front of her without speaking. She didn't look at him. She waited until he backed away before she reached for it. She ate like she expected the food to be snatched away any second. She acts like an animal, he muttered to himself. What did they do to you? Later that night, Rylan ran a diagnostic check on his ship. They were far from any planets now, floating in deep space. He had planned to retire, maybe sell his ship and disappear quietly. But now, he had Leary. And he couldn't just leave her somewhere. He returned to the small living quarters and found her sitting in the corner, clutching the blanket he had given her. She was awake, but barely blinking, as if sleep was dangerous. He sat down slowly, keeping his hands where she could see them. "Do you understand me?" he asked gently. She looked up, her glowing eyes wide with fear. She gave the tiniest nod. "Can you speak my language?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Little bit." He smiled. "That's good. You're safe here, Leary. No one will hurt you. Not ever again." Her lip trembled. She looked down at the floor. The next day, Rylan tried something different. He brought 2 cups of warm broth and sat across from her, holding one. She stared at him, confused. "This one's yours," he said, pushing it toward her. "But I'll drink too, together." She slowly took the cup, hands shaking. He lifted his own. "Drink." They sipped at the same time. For the first time, her eyes met his and didn't look away. That night, she slept on the cot. Days passed. Rylan started showing her things on the ship, basic words, simple tools, pictures. She learned fast. She was quiet, but sharp. He discovered she could understand almost everything, but her fear had silenced her before. She even started moving around the ship on her own. At first, she stayed close to the walls. Then she began exploring the halls, always careful, always quiet, but watching, learning. One morning, she brought him a repaired comm pad. He blinked. "Did you fix this?" She nodded. He smiled. "You're amazing." She tilted her head, unsure what amazing meant, but she felt his warmth and her cheeks flushed. But not everything was easy. That same day, Rylan was fixing a fuse and dropped a wrench. It hit the floor with a loud clang. Leary screamed. She dropped to the floor, curled up tightly, covering her head with both arms. Her body shook uncontrollably. Rylan froze. "Leary!" He rushed over. "It's okay. It was just the wrench." But she didn't move. He didn't touch her. He just sat beside her and whispered softly, "It's okay. I won't hurt you. You're safe." After a few minutes, her trembling slowed. She lifted her head slightly. "Sorry," she whispered. "No. Never be sorry." He looked her in the eyes. "I'm sorry. Sorry for what was done to you. Sorry no one helped you before." Her eyes filled with tears, and for the first time she reached out, just a little, and touched his hand. It was like touching fire and snow at the same time. A moment that said, "I'm still broken, but I want to heal." That night, Rylan found her humming in the hallway. The sound was soft, shaky, like a broken music box finding its tune again. He didn't interrupt. He just listened, knowing the song wasn't just for her. It was for both of them. And somewhere deep in the quiet ship, a new kind of silence grew. One, filled not with fear but with fragile hope. Her name wasn't hers. For days she had said almost nothing, but one night, under the low light of the ship's hallway, Leary finally spoke. "I was never called Leary," she whispered. Rylan paused. He was showing her how to run a systems check on the ship. Her hands had grown steadier, her steps more confident, but her voice, still soft, still scared, carried something heavier that night. He looked at her, waiting. "My name," she said slowly, "was never mine." Rylan led her to the main chamber, where the glow of stars poured in through the viewing glass. They sat across from each other at the table. "Tell me," he said gently. Leary wrapped her arms around herself as if she were cold. "They called me 43B. That was it. When I was born, my mother was already in chains. I never saw her face. She was taken away when I was small." Rylan stayed silent. He didn't push, just listened. "I grew up in metal walls, cold rooms. Every time I asked for a name, they hit me. Said only owners give names." Her eyes darkened. "But owners only gave numbers." She looked at him. "You gave me Leary, but can it really be mine?" Rylan nodded. "It can, if you want it." She looked down, unsure. Later that night, Rylan brought out an old data slate. "I've been searching," he said. "The slavers left behind some files. I hacked into one. There's a record of your transport log and something else." He placed the screen gently in front of her. On it was an image, faded, old, a woman with silver hair, glowing eyes, and a gentle smile. "She was listed as your biological mother," Rylan explained. "Taken during the Koran invasion. Died, Her fingers trembled as they hovered over the screen. "She looks like me," she whispered. "She is you," Rylan said. "She gave birth to someone strong." For the next few days, Leary changed. She began to eat at the table, not the floor. She looked at her reflection for the first time and didn't turn away. She even asked questions about the ship. But one thing bothered her deeply. One morning, Rylan found her sitting alone, staring at the walls. He sat beside her. "Something wrong?" "I keep thinking," she said slowly. "If I wasn't given to you, I'd still be in chains or dead. Why did you treat me like a person?" Rylan leaned back. "Because you are one." She looked away. "Most people didn't think so." "Then most people were wrong," he replied. She turned back to him. "Will you give me a name again?" He smiled. "You still like Leary?" She nodded. "Yes, but I want it from you, not because I'm property, but because you saw me first." Rylan nodded slowly. He reached out, gently touched her shoulder. "Leary," he said, "is yours, not because I gave it, but because you made it real." That same day, a message came in on the long-range comms, encrypted, military, strange code. Rylan read it, and his expression darkened. "What is it?" Leary asked. "A ship is coming," he said. "Not human, not friendly." She froze. "Slavers?" Rylan didn't answer at first. Then slowly, "They might be looking for you." That night, Leary didn't sleep. She sat in her room, hugging the old blanket tight, the memory of Chain and the whip, the cold voice calling her 43B. They all came back. But this time, something else echoed louder. "Leary." She repeated it over and over in her head. She wasn't a number anymore. She wasn't anyone's property. And now, someone wanted to take that away again? No. She found Rylan in the weapons bay. He was checking his pulse rifle loading gear. When he looked up, he was surprised. Leary stood there, in a fresh shirt, arms shaking but her eyes clear. "I want to help," she said. "It's not safe." He started. "I know," she said. "But I'm not hiding again. If they come for me, I want to stand with you." Rylan nodded, proud. Then we faced them together. And somewhere deep in Leary's heart, a fire began to burn. A small flame, not of anger, but of purpose. She would not go back, not now, not ever. Chains of the past. Leary didn't sleep the night before. Instead, she sat in the engine room, staring at the floor. The hum of the ship felt like a heartbeat. Steady, alive, safe. But she knew that feeling wouldn't last. The past was coming, and this time it had teeth. Captain Ryland stood in front of the ship's small control panel, reading the radar. The signal was clear now. An unmarked vessel, moving fast. No reply to hails. No ID. Pirates? No. Something worse. Slavers. He had seen this kind of ship before. Silent, fast, cold. The kind that didn't ask questions. The kind that didn't leave survivors. "They're here for her," Ryland said quietly. Leary stood behind him, her arms crossed tight. Her expression wasn't just fear anymore, it was pain. Old pain, freshly opened. Ryland turned to her. "We can run." She shook her head. "I've run all my life." "Then we fight." She didn't answer at first. Then she said, "If they take me, they'll do worse to others. I was one of hundreds, maybe thousands." Ryland's jaw tightened. "We won't let them." As the ship approached, Leary walked into the old cargo bay. She hadn't been there since Ryland removed her chains. The walls still smelled of rust and sorrow. Her old cage was gone, but the marks were still there. Scratches in the floor. Stains on the walls. Memories flooded back. She remembered the cold metal. The sharp voice that told her she was worthless. The food thrown at her feet like she was an animal. The electric shocks when she cried too loud. She remembered her first owner, a rich trader who bought her at age 6. He called her it. Her second owner made her serve guests like furniture. Her third, she didn't want to think about the third. Tears welled up in her eyes. Then, slowly, she took a deep breath and wiped them away. Leary walked back into the weapon bay. Ryland was checking the defense shields. "Teach me to fight," she said quietly. He looked at her surprised. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "If I'm going to break the chains in my mind, I have to be ready to break the ones trying to come back." Ryland gave her a training knife. "Let's start small." The next hours passed in silence. Just movement, breath, focus. She learned how to stand, how to grip, how to dodge. Her hands were still shaky, but her eyes were sharp. Every motion was stiff but determined. At one point she fell, hard. She scraped her arm. Blood oozed out. But she didn't cry. She stood up again and said, "Keep going." Ryland nodded with respect. When the enemy ship finally arrived, it didn't speak. It hovered near their vessel like a shadow. Then a message came. One line. Cold. Sharp. "Return Unit 43B, or be boarded." Leary stepped forward and answered. Her voice was firm, even if her fingers shook. "Unit 43B is dead." Silence followed. Then, the attack began. The enemy used drones first, fast crawling machines that latched onto Ryland's ship and tried to cut through the hull. Ryland fired up the defense guns. Leary, for the first time, was at the side controls. Her hands flew across the panel as she sealed doors, jammed signals, and locked escape hatches. She learns fast, Ryland thought. But it wasn't just learning. It was surviving. Then the first intruders broke through. Black armor. Electric. Whips. No faces. No words. Leary saw one and froze. The whip in his hand looked just like the one used on her before. Ryland raised his blaster, but the soldier was too fast. Leary screamed, then jumped between them. Her small blade slashed across. The attacker's leg. He staggered. Rylan finished him with one shot. He looked at Leary, shocked. Her hand bled from the blow, but she didn't stop. More soldiers poured in. She stood beside Rylan, eyes blazing. "I'm not afraid anymore," she whispered. Together they pushed back the attack. Each corridor echoed with fire and steel. Rylan fought like a soldier. Leary fought like someone who had nothing left to lose, and when the last slaver fell, silence returned, but it was a different silence now. A free one. Later, as they cleaned up the mess, Leary sat near the cage marks again. She traced them with her fingers. "I thought I would break today," she said quietly. Rylan sat beside her. "You didn't." She nodded slowly. "Chains are more than metal, but I think today I broke one." He smiled. "You're not who you were," he said. "No," she whispered. "I'm not." He fights for her freedom. The ship was quiet again, but not peaceful. Smoke hung in the corridors. Sparks flew from damaged panels. The scent of scorched metal mixed with something worse. Blood. Rylan stood in the command room, holding his side where he'd been hit. His breathing was rough, his face pale, but his eyes were sharp. "We're not done," he said. Leary stood beside him, clutching a blaster in her small, bruised hands. Her clothes were torn, her hair matted with sweat, but her eyes, they were alive now. "Another ship is coming," she said. "Same signature." Rylan didn't curse, didn't panic. He simply nodded. "They won't stop until they take you." Leary looked down. "Then let's make them stop." The second slaver ship wasn't like the first. It was larger, stronger, and this one spoke. A deep voice echoed through the comm system. "You have stolen our property. Return it, and you may live." Leary stepped forward, pressing the comm button. Her voice was clear. "I was never yours. I'm not property. Come if you dare." The voice laughed. "The animal thinks it's free. Let us remind you who you are." The line went dead. Rylan began preparing traps. He wired explosive charges along the docking tunnel. Leary set up shield breakers along the inner doors. She remembered how slavers worked, how they entered, how they hunted, how they controlled. Now she used that knowledge against them. For the first time in her life, she wasn't running from them. She was waiting. As the ship docked, Rylan turned to her. "You don't have to do this." Leary looked him in the eye. "Yes, I do. If I hide behind you now, then I'll always be a slave inside." He didn't argue. Instead, he handed her a spare sidearm. She took it, hands steady. The door exploded inward. Black-armored slavers poured in, faster and more aggressive than before. Their boots echoed like thunder. Rylan fired first, then Leary. The corridor became a storm of light and sound. One slaver tried to grab Leary by the arm. She slammed her blaster into his face and pulled the trigger. The shot rang out and he dropped. Another lunged at her. She rolled under him, then fired into his back. She moved like someone who had waited her whole life to fight back. Then came the leader, taller than the others, masked. His armor was red, not black. And in his hand, an electric whip that crackled with blue lightning. He stepped over the bodies of his own men like they were trash. Rylan aimed his blaster. Too late. The whip struck. Electricity surged through his body. He dropped to his knees. "Rylan!" Leary screamed. The slaver turned to her, laughing through his mask. "You were always weak," he hissed. "You cried like a child when we trained you." Leary froze. The voice. She knew that voice. He was the third owner, the one she had tried to forget. He took a step forward. "Return now, and he lives." Rylan groaned on the floor. His body twitched, but he tried to rise. Leary stepped between them, arms shaking. "No," she said. "You're done controlling me." The slaver laughed again. "You think you've changed? You are still 43B. "No," she said. "My name is Leary." And then she pulled the trigger. The shot hit the slaver in the chest. He staggered but didn't fall. The armor was too strong. He raised the whip again, just as Rylan tackled him from behind. The two men crashed into the wall. The whip clattered. To the ground, now! Ryland shouted. Leary didn't hesitate. She stands by his side. The stars outside were quiet, but inside the ship, a storm had passed. Leary walked the halls barefoot, her fingers brushing the metal walls as if they were alive. These same corridors had once felt like a prison. Now, they were home. Ryland was still resting. His body was bruised, burned, but healing. She checked on him often, bringing food, changing bandages, and sitting beside him even when he slept. He didn't ask her to. She chose to, because this time, she wasn't serving out of fear. She stayed because he had given her something no one else ever had, a reason to stand. 3 days passed. On the 4th, Ryland sat up slowly and asked, "Where are we?" Leary handed him a glass of water. "Near the drift belt. I've kept us hidden." He smiled weakly. "You flew the ship?" "Every minute." Ryland blinked in surprise. "And systems?" "Stable. I fixed the coolant lines too," she said quietly, like it wasn't a big deal. He chuckled, then winced in pain. "Looks like I'm not the captain anymore." She smiled. "Maybe you're just the backup." They both laughed, a small sound, but full of warmth. Later, while patching a hull breach together, Ryland paused and asked her, "You know they might come again, right? Slavers don't quit easily." Leary didn't flinch. "Let them." He looked at her. "You're not afraid anymore?" She looked at her hands covered in grease and small scars. "I was born afraid," she said. "It lived in my skin, my breath, my blood. But now fear has no home here anymore." She tapped her chest. "Because now, I choose what lives inside me." That night, the two sat together in the cockpit. Outside, the stars shimmered like distant memories. Ryland had his leg propped, up on a crate. Leary curled her feet under her, her hair tied back. They didn't speak for a long while. Finally, she asked, "Do you remember the day they gave me to you?" "I do. You looked at me like I was something broken." "I was wrong," he said. "You weren't broken. You were just waiting for someone to see you." She nodded. "I think I was waiting for me too." A soft alert beeped. A ship was approaching, this time small and unarmed. Leary scanned the data. "It's a refugee shuttle. No weapons, just civilians." Ryland leaned forward. "Should we hail them?" She didn't answer. Instead, she opened comms and spoke clearly. "This is the vessel Echo Star. We have space, food, and medical supplies. If you need help, we're here." Ryland raised an eyebrow. "We?" She nodded. "You helped me. Now I help others." The shuttle docked. Inside were 3 frightened beings, 2 children and a woman with a fresh scar down her face. They looked just like Leary had when Ryland first saw her. Silent, shivering, lost. Leary knelt in front of the smallest child, a young girl with orange eyes and torn clothes. "Are you scared?" Leary asked softly. The child nodded. Leary reached out and took her hand. "I was too. But you're not alone anymore." Ryland watched from behind, amazed. Leary was no longer the girl in chains. She was leading now, not with commands, not with orders, but with kindness. That evening, Leary helped the children eat and put them to bed in one of the spare rooms. She gave the mother a warm drink and stitched her cut with gentle fingers. Ryland met her in the hall afterward. "You were born to lead," he said. She shook her head. "I was born to survive, but now, I choose to live." They stood close, facing each other in the soft hallway light. Ryland cleared his throat. "You know, I've traveled a long time alone." "I know," she said. "I never wanted a crew. Or a family, but now..." He looked into her glowing eyes. "I can't imagine this ship without you." Leary stepped closer. "Then don't," she whispered. That night, for the first time, she slept in the captain's quarters. Not on the floor, not in a corner, beside Ryland, not because she was claimed, but because she belonged. not a slave, but a bride. The ship drifted quietly through open space. Leary stood at the wide viewing glass, her silver hair softly falling down her back. She wasn't wearing chains now. No collar, no ID code stamped on her skin. Just a simple dress. Soft fabric Rylan had found for her during their last stop on a peaceful trade moon. It was the first time she had ever worn something just because it felt nice. Behind her, Rylan entered the bridge. For a moment, he said nothing. He just watched her. The girl he once received as a chained reward was now the heart of his ship and his reason to keep flying. "Penny for your thoughts?" he said gently. She turned, smiling. "I don't know what a penny is." Old Earth saying. It means, "What are you thinking about?" She looked out at the stars again. "I was thinking, this galaxy is full of people like I used to be. Caged, hurt, forgotten." Rylan stepped beside her. "And you want to help them?" She nodded. "But not just help. I want to show them they can choose their own story, that they're not what was done to them." He looked at her for a long time. "You've come a long way, Leary." She looked down. "It's not just me. You stood beside me when no one else would." "You stood beside me too," he replied. "You saved my life. Twice." They smiled at each other, but the silence between them had weight, something unspoken, something waiting. Rylan took a deep breath. His voice was rough. "Honest. Leary, I was given you as a slave. A thing." She flinched slightly but nodded. "Yes, I remember." He stepped closer. "But you became the strongest person I know. You run this ship better than me. You fix engines, you save lives, you speak softly to scared children, and you stare slavers in the eye like fire." Her cheeks flushed. "Why are you saying this?" "Because," he said, "I want to ask you something, but only if you know that you can say no." She turned to face him, heart pounding. "Ask." He took her hand gently. "Leary, will you be my wife?" She didn't answer right away. Tears filled her eyes, not from fear but from the weight of the question. Her whole life had been about orders, about being taken, sold, traded. Her voice had never mattered. But now someone was asking her. Not claiming, not demanding, asking. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, she whispered, "Yes." The small ceremony took place 2 days later. No grand hall, no audience. Just the crew they'd rescued, the stars and a few glowing candles Rylan kept for quiet nights. The alien mother Leary had helped served as the witness. The little girl she'd comforted brought the ring. Rylan stood tall in his old uniform, patched and worn. Leary wore a simple white cloth tied around her shoulders, her silver hair loose and glowing. Their vows were short. "I don't need gold or land," Rylan said. "I just want your smile each morning." "I don't need promises of safety," Leary replied. "Only that we walk forward, side by side." When the words were spoken and the rings exchanged, there was no kiss forced or expected. Instead, Leary reached up slowly, touched his cheek, and leaned in first. It was soft, gentle, real. That night, the ship felt different. Not because anything had changed outside, but because everything had changed inside. She curled up beside him, her hand resting on his chest, feeling his heartbeat. "I used to wonder if love was just another trick," she whispered. "A word they used before pain." "And now?" he asked. "Now? I know it can be freedom too." The next morning, they prepared to depart. A new signal came in, another distress call, a mining moon under attack. Slavers again. Leary pulled on her boots. Rylan loaded their gear. They didn't need to speak. They just nodded. They weren't running anymore. They were going toward the fire, to help others, to fight for those still caged, to be the kind of rescue Leary once needed. As the ship lifted into space, the little girl they'd rescued waved from The window, she shouted, "Miss Leary, are you really a queen now?" Leary laughed and waved back. "No," she said. "I'm something better." She turned to Rylan. "I'm his."